Aisha Khan could barely keep her eyes open as she settled into row 8, seat A. Her laptop screen still glowed faintly from the flurry of blog edits she had typed out before boarding. One more post to finish, one more deadline to chase. Being a travel blogger wasn't as glamorous as it looked on social media. Between connecting flights, sleepless nights, and endless drafts, exhaustion had become her most loyal companion. The flight from New York to London was supposed to be her short escape, a few hours of stillness above the world. She tucked her hair behind her ear, slid the window shade up just enough to watch the wings slice through the sunset, and exhaled deeply. The orange sky faded to violet as the plane began its long climb over the Atlantic. Around her, the cabin was slowly dimming. Flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisle, collecting empty coffee cups and distributing water bottles with practiced smiles. A child 2 rows back asked his mother why clouds looked like cotton candy, and someone nearby chuckled softly. The low hum of the engines created a rhythmic background, steady and hypnotic. Aisha reclined her seat slightly, pulled the thin airline blanket up to her chin, and let her head sink against the headrest. The world outside was fading now. No city lights, no stars, just the infinite stretch of darkness. She thought of the places she'd been. Deserts, beaches, neon cities, all of them chasing one thing: stories. Every journey she took was fuel for her blog, Wanderlight. Her readers imagined adventure. She mostly found fatigue. Still, somewhere between duty and dream, there was peace in the air. She smiled faintly. For once, she didn't have to be online, connected, or performing. Just another face in the quiet, suspended world of 30,000 feet. A soft announcement came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude.
You may now use approved electronic devices." The captain's calm voice felt distant, like a lullaby.
She barely registered it before her eyelids grew heavier. She shifted slightly, feeling the vibration of the engines through the armrest. The temperature in the cabin was perfect. Cool enough to nestle in, warm enough to drift off. The faint scent of brewed coffee lingered, mixing with the sterile freshness of pressurized air. Someone coughed softly. A zipper closed. A light blinked overhead. Aisha's thoughts wandered to London, the foggy mornings, the street cafes she loved, the taste of Earl Grey tea after a red-eye flight. Maybe she'd finally take a break there. Maybe she'd write something just for herself this time. Her breathing slowed. Her fingers loosened around the corner of the blanket. The hum of the engines deepened into a steady, soothing rhythm. For a few precious minutes, she felt safe, untouchable, floating above a sleeping world, and as her consciousness slipped quietly into dreams. Row 8 fell silent. Outside, the endless ocean stretched beneath them. Black and calm. She never noticed the faint flicker of the cockpit light ahead. Not yet. The first thing Aisha felt was the drop. A sickening, stomach-twisting plunge that jerked her awake. Her head snapped forward, blanket sliding to the floor. For a heartbeat, everything inside the cabin was weightless. A collective gasp hung in the air. Then the plane steadied, engines roaring louder, as if the sky itself had taken a breath. Aisha blinked rapidly, trying to understand what had happened. The calm hum from before was gone, replaced by uneasy murmurs and the shuffle of movement. Seatbelt signs flickered on with a soft ding, followed by a faint crackle of the intercom. But no voice came through. Across the aisle, an elderly man clutched his armrest, whispering something to his wife. A baby started crying 2 rows back. The air suddenly felt heavier, thicker, like the cabin had lost its calm and filled instead with unspoken fear. Then, a sound Aisha would never forget, hurried footsteps pounding down the aisle. 2 flight attendants moved quickly, their expressions tight, eyes locked on the front of the plane. One carried a first aid kit. The other pressed her earpiece, muttering something too fast to catch. Aisha leaned forward, her heartbeat matching the turbulence that trembled beneath her feet. Her mind scrambled for logic. Maybe a passenger was sick, maybe it was nothing. But the moment she caught sight of the attendants' faces, pale and tense, her chest constricted. And then it came, the voice over the PA system. Shaky and urgent. "If there's a doctor on board, please come to the cockpit immediately." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. A few seconds of silence, and then whispers broke out everywhere. What happened? Did she say cockpit? Oh my God. A man in a business suit unbuckled his seatbelt and stood looking around nervously. Another passenger raised her hand saying, "I'm a nurse," and was quickly ushered forward by a crew member. The flight attendant's polite professionalism had vanished. Now her tone was clipped, trembling, almost pleading. Aisha's pulse pounded in her ears. She turned toward the window. The world outside was nothing but a vast, endless sea of white, clouds stretching to infinity. No land, no escape, just sky. For the first time, she became acutely aware of how fragile everything felt. A giant metal bird floating above the world, its safety dependent on a few unseen hands. And now something was wrong with one of those hands. The minutes that followed were agonizingly slow. People spoke in low voices. Someone prayed softly. The captain's calm, reassuring tone never came back. Aisha tried to steady her breathing. Maybe it's fine, she told herself. Pilots get sick sometimes. There's always a co-pilot, right? But her gut twisted with unease. The turbulence continued in small, irregular waves, like the sky itself was uneasy. Somewhere near the front, a muffled shout echoed. Then, silence. Aisha gripped her armrest, knuckles white. The child behind her stopped crying. Even the engines seemed to quiet for a moment. It was the silence that terrified her most. Because in that silence, 30,000 feet above the ocean, she realized something was very, very wrong. The minutes after the announcement felt like an eternity. The cabin, once filled with murmurs and whispers, had sunk into a frightened stillness. The soft overhead lights flickered slightly, painting every face in pale gold. The hum of the engine seemed louder now, heavier, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. Aisha gripped the edge of her seat, staring at the front of the cabin where two attendants huddled near the curtain that separated economy from first class. Their hushed voices were urgent, their eyes darting toward the cockpit door again and again. The nurse who had rushed forward earlier had not come back. Then, one of the flight attendants, her hair slightly undone and her composure cracking, stepped into the aisle. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but she tried to sound calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Everything is under control." But it wasn't. Everyone could hear it in her tone, the brittle edge of fear. She turned toward the row where the nurse had been sitting, spoke quickly to the man next to her, then disappeared behind the curtain once more. Moments later, she returned, eyes red, hands shaking. She knelt beside a nearby passenger, her voice barely a whisper, but loud enough for Aisha to catch. "The pilot's had a heart attack, and the co-pilot is unconscious." The words hit Aisha like turbulence in her chest. "The pilot, heart attack? The co-pilot, unconscious?" For a second, she thought she'd misheard. That couldn't happen. Not both, not at once. But the flight attendants, trembling, confirmed it. Someone gasped. Another person began to cry softly. A man stood and shouted, "How's that possible? Who's flying the plane?" The attendant's voice cracked as she replied, "The autopilot is engaged." For now. For now. Two words that sent a chill down Aisha's spine. An older man a few seats ahead raised his hand weakly. His voice was low, rough. "I've flown small planes before," he said. "Single engine, nothing like this, but I might be able to help if someone can keep me steady." All eyes turned to him. Hope flickered, faint, fragile. The attendants exchanged glances. One nodded and motioned for him to follow. He stood, his knees trembling, clutching the back of each seat for balance as he moved forward. Aisha watched him go. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Her brain screamed to stay still, to remain just another passenger, invisible and safe. "You're not trained. You're not brave. You're just a blogger." But then she saw the look on the flight attendant's face. That desperate, helpless look of someone holding the weight of 200 lives. And suddenly, sitting still felt impossible. Her hands shook as she unbuckled her seatbelt. The click echoed in her ears like a gunshot. She rose slowly, steadying herself against the seatbacks as she made her way forward. People stared, whispering, but she kept her eyes fixed ahead. When she reached the curtain, the attendant met her eyes, startled, but not resistant. "Can you help?" she asked, voice cracking. Aisha hesitated only a heartbeat before answering. "Tell me what to do." And with that, she stepped through the curtain, leaving the safety of row 8 behind. The curtain fell shut behind Aisha with a soft rustle, and the hum of the cabin was replaced by the roar of chaos. The cockpit was alive, warning lights flashing like red lightning, alarms shrieking in urgent bursts, and 2 pilots slumped motionless in their seats. The air smelled of metal and panic. One of the flight attendants was kneeling beside the captain, pressing fingers to his wrist, shaking her head. "He's gone," she whispered hoarsely. The co-pilot's chest rose shallowly, but he was out cold. Aisha froze in the doorway, her heart hammering so violently she thought everyone could hear it. The older man, the one who'd said he'd flown before, was already in the captain's seat, scanning the glowing panels in front of him. His voice was low, tight with fear. "This isn't like a Cessna. I can't find half of these controls." He turned to her. "Can you work the radio?" Aisha hesitated, then nodded, sliding shakily into the co-pilot's seat. The headset felt heavy on her ears. Her fingers brushed against a cluster of switches she didn't recognize. Her mouth was dry, but she forced her voice out. "Mayday, mayday. This is Flight 247. Both pilots are down." "We need help." There was static, a hiss that stretched for an eternity, and then a calm male voice crackled through. "Flight 247, this is London Center." "Copy that. Stay calm, we've got you." "Who's at the controls?" The man beside her leaned forward. "Passenger, I've flown small planes." "Understood. Engage your autopilot hold. Don't touch the throttle yet. We're going to walk you through this, one step at a time." The older man's hands trembled over the controls. Aisha's eyes darted across the maze of glowing buttons, blinking warnings and rising numbers.
The sound of alarms pressed against her skull like needles. "Level the wings," ground control instructed. "Check your altitude, 30,000 feet.
"Begin gradual descent." Aisha watched as the man followed each command, his breath ragged. She relayed every word, her voice steadier than she felt. Sweat dripped down her temple, soaking into the headset padding. The plane began to descend, slow and deliberate. The nose tilted forward and Aisha's stomach lurched again. Through the windshield, the endless white clouds broke apart, revealing patches of gray ocean below. Somewhere far away, lightning flashed. Ground control's voice was a lifeline. "You're doing great, Flight 247. Maintain heading 240. Flaps down 10 degrees. The cockpit shuddered as the older man obeyed. Aisha clenched her fists on her knees. Please hold together, she thought. Just a little longer. When the runway lights finally pierced the night, 2 perfect lines of gold leading them home, her breath caught. They were almost there. "Reduce throttle," the voice said calmly. "Now pull back." Gently. The wheels kissed the tarmac with a thunderous thud. For a moment no one moved. Then the engines roared in reverse, slowing, stopping. They were on the ground. The cabin behind them erupted in cheers, sobs, applause. People shouted, cried, prayed. Aisha didn't speak. She sat frozen in the co-pilot's seat, her hands still trembling over the controls, heart pounding like a drum. Only one thought echoed in her head. The girl who'd been just sleeping in row 8 had just helped save 200 lives.